Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Welcome to Church Development's webinar. Today, we're talking about church capital campaigns during COVID-19. Dennis, how are you doing?
I'm doing super from my location here on the moon. Happy to be here. And I see Daryl's joining us from his downtown New York City apartment. Am I right, Daryl?
Yes. Well, actually downtown Kansas City, because that's where I live.
Okay. Looking very
yes,
chic.
and I'm glad to be here as well.
Oh, marvelous.
We'll give everyone a couple minutes to log on, and then we'll get started. I'm Stephanie Barone here with Church Development. And today our agenda for the webinar is how do you plan a capital campaign during COVID? We're going to talk about the pandemic impact on giving, our church members' unmet needs, unexpected financial opportunity during this time, the timing of it all, research and gift range chart to help you with some specifics. We're going to cover using technology and social media, specific action steps that you can take in each of these phases, and then what to do next. So this is an interactive webinar. That means we really appreciate you spending your time and also sharing your input. If you have any questions about the webinar content or anything that you think might be relevant, please share your questions and comments about what's going on in the Q&A section or the chat section. I think that's the best way to learn, is from each other and what has worked. And if you have a question, likely someone else may be asking themselves that same question. These slides, as always, are going to be shareable. We'll send you an email in about 24 hours with the recorded webinar and these slides, so you can get them in the email. And for those who signed up but were unable to attend at the last minute, they will still get that email. We also will have it uploaded on our YouTube Church Development channel. And feel free to forward these emails on to other people too, if you think they might be able to benefit from it. You can email us too, Church Development. That would be office@church-development.com, or give us a call. Either way, we are available. So a little bit about us. Church Development was founded in 1992. Our mission is to increase generosity without traditional fundraising. We have helped raise over $200 million in churchial capital campaigns and over $800 million in annual stewardship giving. And how our approach is different from other capital campaign consultants. First of all, ours is based in scripture and 30 years of both research and experience. Our ask is based in prayer and discernment and not pressure. Typically, we can see increased weekly giving for 3 years after that campaign, and planned giving program begins after capital campaign. So you start with a capital campaign and then you have a regular planned giving. 1 Peter 4:10 tells us, like good stewards of the manifold grace of God, serve one another with whatever gift each of you has received. And that's the foundation for church development. With us today, we have Dennis Green. He is the president and founder of Church Development. He has over 30 years experience. He's helped raise over $200 million for over 100 clients. He's a husband, father, cancer survivor. He is author of the book Stewardship System: How to Increase Generosity Without Fundraising. And he's published research as well. And he's always happy to bend your ear and tell you about that. Next up, we have our guest presenter, Daryl Prater. He is our senior consultant here at Church Development. He's been involved with church ministries for over 30 years. He's very passionate about leading churches, and he really walks with them step by step in achieving their goals. And he establishes long-term relationships with so many people in these churches he's helped. And he's also a choir director too. And now I'm going to turn it over to Dennis. Dennis Green, it's up to you.
Thank you very much, Stephanie, for your
Oh, wow.
introduction. And as Stephanie said, we sure welcome your questions, between Daryl and myself. Daryl, I hate to confess how many years we've been at. How many years have you been at it?
I've been at it 15 years, probably about half as many years as you have, I bet.
Well, that implies that I'm a lot older than you. So thanks. Just because I'm bald, Daryl, I can feel it, buddy. So you all should know if you're listening. Daryl's our expert.
It doesn't hurt when I say it, so that's why I said it.
Yeah, see, I'm just a little bit ahead of you on the hair care department. So Daryl and I have this bias towards research, and the 10 members that make up the church development team, we're all kind of the same. We're cut from the same cloth. We have this calling that's based in 1 Peter 4:10, and we have discerned God's will in our lives after other careers. So Daryl, as Stephanie said, he's a very talented musician. For 17 years, he was in ministry, leading music ministry, and he's very talented. And then God put this calling on him to pursue serving churches in a new and more challenging way. And stewardship is challenging, particularly when you look at the big picture. The average person only gives 1% to 2% of their income. Only 5% actually tithe. And then we have this pandemic. It's just been a pounding on us. So we collect research. All 10 of us share what we've learned from all over the country and the many different journals that we read, both in the church world and the nonprofit world, and really even beyond that, in the secular corporate world. We take everything we can to serve churches. We've got a robust scientific background as well as our scriptural and spiritual basis. So here's some bad news. Here's what's happened. Between 36 and 45% of all churches have just gotten hammered in their giving. And I'm very sad to report that. But we've kind of discovered why them and not others, because 25% are stable and about 30% have had an increase in giving. So what has been the key factor? Well, apparently it is digital presence, the ease of giving. Now, I watched a documentary recently that was just so very critical of our modern devices and how they're designed to sort of manage our attention so that we become addicted to those devices. So I don't like that. It's better if we look at those devices as tools and we kind of keep them at arm's length. Now, unfortunately, those devices have become kind of glued to most of our arms. So we've got to facilitate where people are. The key thing for those churches that have maintained or increased in their giving is having this digital presence, which means you've got to have a church app, and it's got to be easy for people to give. And we've got to meet them where they are. So we've got to communicate using that device, which means text, video, and you've got to have a church app. That's no longer an option at this point. Now, we've discovered some horrible, weird news. George Barnum, one of our main researchers in the church world, he's the guy that coined the term church shopping. And he discovered a couple of years ago that people join churches not for a theological basis, for the community, the social connection basis, which I wish it wasn't that way. I wish it was more theologically based, but it's reflected in this bottom statistic. 1 out of 5 people is now giving to more than one church. Isn't that interesting? And just, I don't know, maybe a little disturbing. So what do we have to do? We've got to get our game on. So we're going to talk about how to do that. Daryl, am I missing anything? Have you seen anything consistent across the 10 churches that you have helped over the past year as they've been impacted by COVID?
No, I think you covered it all, Dennis. I think one of the main things is that churches are trying to stay connected, and they need some proven ways in a fairly short period of time of how to keep their church connected. And I feel like that we have some effective ways that we'll address today.
Okay.
But that's one of the top ones that I'm seeing across the board with churches.
Okay, Daryl, do you mind talking about your recent success, your June 30th fiscal year-end campaign? Now, this was not really an annual campaign, but this was just the year-end because they have been hammered. Tell us what happened, and if you don't mind sharing percentages and tactics, that'd be very helpful.
Sure. So we've been working with an African-American parish in Atlanta, delightful group of folks. We love working with them. Our Lady of Lourdes is the name of the church. And we started a capital campaign last fall and then took just a little bit of a hiatus, and now we're picking it back up. But we were working specifically on the end of the year, May and June, to get their giving up so that they would end, hopefully, balanced or in the black. So they were about 12 to 15% behind in their giving. We came up with this idea after we analyzed their congregation, their parish, that those who typically give when they're physically at the parish are the ones that we're missing, and that is making up some of this, getting behind the 12 to 15%, lagging behind financially. So we drafted 4 letters for Father Jeffrey Ott, the priest. He edited those. They were to targeted groups like parishioners, adult parishioners who have kids who would normally give at the church. Another group was online givers. Another group was older adults who typically give when they're at the church.
Right. That's
we did those letters, and then the priest followed up with about a 30 to 45-second video, which really sealed it and made it happen because he's very well loved in that. So if you're not doing little short videos from your pastor or priest, those are a great way to get people engaged. So by the end of June, we had not only gotten to a balanced budget, but we were about 6% over. So it was a success in a 2-month period of time. And those are things that I think can transfer to other churches. So you may be interested in kind of taking note of that idea.
All right. So, that second bullet, the 4 tailored videos, is an example of how we use technology to deal with the pandemic. So the pastor created a specific message which corresponded with the specific letter. So not everybody got the same letter. It was tailored. It was additional work, but it was $150,000 dividend. So was it worth it? Heck yeah, it was worth it. It was worth the effort. Absolutely. So now in this next slide, I borrowed this from the corporate sector, and then here they talk about employees, but it presents a challenging circumstance. No longer, it's just not life as usual. If you look at that bottom level, this is a secular psychological, it's well embraced with the theory that unmet needs motivate. So when people have anxiety and stress, they think of that, and they're unable to think about their relationship with God or their faith community. They're stuck into how am I going to get my next meal, and am I safe? So we have every congregation has a strata that is either unemployed or underemployed right now, and we've really got to care about those people. We've got to minister to those people and not exert pressure. So as you proceed, just please be aware that we have a bunch of people who have just been hammered, and they're struggling with their basic needs. Now, the second challenge is that the flow of communication is compromised, and a lot of churches have not yet started meeting again. They don't interact with each other. They don't hear messages from the pulpit. Before the pulpit, the national average was not what the average person would attend 4 Sundays per month. It was down there 3 or a little bit under 3. So church attendance has been declining. And then with COVID, we are fortunate at the church I go to, if we are at 1/4 of the capacity of the church. Now on the upside, we have churches that are doing well offering online worship, their numbers are actually increasing. So we've got to take advantage of that as you're planning a capital campaign for your church in the time of COVID. We have got to accommodate people who might have never been to our church before. So their esteem needs are suffering. Their self-actualization needs, their relationship with God is suffering because they don't have the regular assistance that we in the church will provide through regular worship. So these three images are meant to portray, I mean, we have this unmet need to connect as a people of faith and to pray together and to study, to learn. So these are enormous needs for people of faith, and they are not being met. So what can we do to connect people socially, to engage people in creating an uplifting vision? One of my favorite books is Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. And that quote, my heart is restless until it rests in thee. So we have those, that's part of our DNA. So our work is going to be doubled if we're going to do a capital campaign in the time of COVID, but we can do it. It is a doable deal. Now, we have an unexpected financial opportunity. I was consulting with a science group that they're scientists, so they think statistically all the time. And their fiscal year-end campaign was dramatically larger because of this unexpected financial opportunity. Their leadership gifts, they had 5 donors who gave as much as the next 500 donors. And today the Dow is at 27,000. 10 years ago, it was at 10,000. That's a 170% increase. So what it says is that your leadership gifts can be significant. They can be robust, but you've got to now shift as you plan your church capital campaign to accommodate that kind of thinking. For a moment, we have to become secular and think like fundraising. We begin with stewardship and scripture, and then we've got to be very statistically driven tacticians for strategic implementation. Now, the macroeconomic view is that the average person only gives 2% of their income to the church. That is the unfortunate norm. In the Catholic world, it is 1.2%. It's a great book by a gentleman named Zek, who's a researcher out of Villanova, titled Why Catholics Don't Give. I encourage you all to read it. It is a failure analysis of why Catholics give almost half of what their Protestant brethren give. It's a fascinating insight into failure analysis. My son is a big fan of Chuck Norris, whose advice for success is, number 1, figure out what doesn't work. And then number 2, don't do that. Sound advice in any circumstance. So as you're planning your church capital campaign in the time of COVID, just be aware that most of us have the ability to increase our giving. Gallup polling discovered a couple of years ago, the ceiling for giving seems to be right around 5% for most people. That's the comfort level. Now, as you look at your congregation, you can do the numbers right away. Across our country, about 3% of our population has a net worth above $1 million. About a third of your congregation has income above $100,000. Now, not to bore you with more statistics, but there is research on happiness that says the minimum household income for happiness is about $77,000. If you make less than that, then you struggle with making the basic bills to be paid and up to date and comfortable. So you have a third of your population that is well above that minimum comfort level. So just these 2 statistics give you a sense of you have some potential in the leadership giving area that are acutely aware of this graph on your right. Now, Gallup polling also discovered that 60% of all of us who are charitable donors would give more if they were asked. Isn't that interesting? So,
Dennis, I
yes.
do have a couple of questions for you.
Please, fire away.
Going to the previous slide, you talked about the dramatic increase in the stock market.
Yes.
So I'm wondering, does that maybe look different in terms of how people give? You know, people aren't so sure what their income's going to look like because of COVID, but yet they maybe have a great stock portfolio. Does that look different in terms of what they give or how they give it? And then my other question from Sandra, she's asked, can you address capital campaign versus annual campaign, and what's the difference?
Yes. Well, let's take Sandra's question first. In a church capital campaign, it's going to be very intense and it's going to last about 6 months. An annual stewardship campaign will most likely just last 1 month for the asking portion. And we hope that you have a year-round effort for stewardship education and engagement. So there are dramatic differences in the time and expense involved as well. A church capital campaign, well, the national average for all capital campaigns, whether they're a church or a nonprofit organization, is that you have to spend $1 to raise 10. That's the industry average. Now, our average is a lot better than that. Over the past 30 years, our average has been 25 to 1. For every $1 we're paid, we usually raise 25. That would be a norm. In an annual stewardship effort, the International Catholic Stewardship Conference had a statistical presentation that enlightened church leadership that says the average church who has a successful stewardship effort invests 2% of their budget in stewardship expenses. So just those difference, 2% to 10%, and the timing, it tells you that a capital campaign for your church is a lot more time intensive and expensive. Any business person in the world would tell you a 10 to 1 return on investment is spectacular. It's fantastic. So like a farmer, we should be ready to invest in planting the seeds. Now, Daryl,
if I may,
go ahead.
If I may add, just everything that Dennis said is absolutely true. Just at a very, very basic level, annual campaign or annual stewardship, that deals with the funds that it takes to run the day-to-day operation of the church. So that's, whatever your ministry budget involves, ministry, paying of salaries, maintenance, things like that. No special offerings in that. The capital campaign is over and above pledges and gifts to raise funds specifically for a new church building, or maybe renovation, or maybe to pay off debt. And capital campaign gifts would be over and above regular giving to the church so that the church stays strong. So that's just at a very basic level to make sure that we're connecting today on what the difference between those two campaigns are. Excuse me.
Thank you, Daryl. And please jump in as we go. I got another question about a church app, and I will answer that in just a minute as well. But let's go to her other question as well. And her question about someone might have a healthy stock portfolio, but unsure about their income. So when do we begin? It's a great time of uncertainty. So the timing has got to be based on the needs of the church. I'm working with a wonderful church who's thinking about a capital campaign, and they're in Florida, and they have a lead gift, and they want to build a student ministry center, and they've got an exciting vision. And that the time is now because they have momentum. I have another church that's in Atlanta that has a deadline. That's such a hand of God miracle in their life. It's the coolest story. They have 5 acres and a beautiful church building that they're buying for $1 million. Who on earth gets that kind of deal anywhere, especially in a city like Atlanta? It's just a miracle. And they're going to close on it about a year from now. So they have got to get on it. God has plunked this gift in their lap, and they have got to get moving. It's a sense of urgency. So the need of the church is your driver. Okay. And then the second one is you begin your capital campaign after people have been engaged somehow in the decision-making process. I like doing a feasibility study before we begin because that gives everybody the opportunity to connect and share their thoughts, and they're well listened to. It's a good idea to have experts on board so you know what you're doing. If you're going to build a building, you're going to hire an architect. Get an architect involved before you do your capital campaign. You got to have the budgets. You got to have all these financial things organized as well. You got to have your leaders ready. Now, the bottom bullet here is do it before the stock market crashes. Who knows when that's going to happen, but we do know right now it's at an all-time high, and it just fluctuates 26, 27, 28. It's been fluctuating like that for quite a while now. It would be a bummer if the stock market dropped to 12,000 tomorrow and we could have done a capital campaign today. Just every month that you delay, it costs you about 10% of your annual budget. You just have delayed your revenue. That's what happened. If you push it off, you could have had about 10% additional revenue towards your capital budget for every month that you delay. So should you delay until you're ready? Yes, but don't delay. I mean, if you've got all the other ducks in a row, one
Dennis,
must be bold.
Quick comment about not delaying. Now, this was 12 years ago. We've been doing this a long time, but everyone remembers the economic downturn that began in October of 2008. We were working with a vibrant Lutheran church who had planned to have their Commitment Sunday in late October of 2008. On that particular Sunday, the market crash, if you will, the economic downturn, was just a few days prior to that. They still met their goal. They even had $60-some thousand come in the second year from new pledgers that weren't a part of the Commitment Sunday. So, who would have thought that would have happened? We would have naturally thought that campaign was just going to be a disaster. It turned out great. So usually now is the best time to do a campaign.
Yeah, well, thank you, Daryl. So the spirit of discernment is a real important, prayer and discernment. We've got to balance faith and reason. So we've got to be analytical, but we've got to, pray before, during, and after. And we've got to get everybody involved in that discernment process as well. Now let's go a little bit deeper into answering her question. This is a gift range chart from the secular world, and this is very close to what happens in our church capital campaigns as well. The 80-20 rule is really a norm. 80% of the funds usually come from 20% of the donors. So if you look at this chart, you can see the bottom two levels. You got about 100 donors giving you about 20%, and then you've got about 30 donors that are giving you 80% of the money. And you could even be more critical. In this, you've got 12 donors that are giving you about 3/4 of the money. And that is kind of normal. So if you think of the impact of the inflated stock market value on your church capital campaign, right now, today, your top 10 or dozen donors who have the capacity to give you 80 or 90% of all the money that you raise, their investments are at an all-time high. So when you think about timing, just that one single consideration is just something to keep in mind. It should not be your only one, but it is something to think about. Now, we're in such an unusual time in that we have a strata of our congregations that are suffering economically. They are out of work or they're underemployed and they're facing severe economic challenges. And then at the other end of the spectrum, the stock market, people who have money in the stock market have never done better. So we're in a challenge. As a fundraising professional, I will tell you that things have gone well in the fundraising world in spite of this high unemployment and the economic challenges that we're facing. Okay, now let me shift gears just a little bit and tell you, as you're considering your church capital campaign in the time of COVID, the challenge is upon you this moment to now become an expert in technology and social media. And I would like you to withhold judgment. And I say that because I'm pretty judgy when it comes to social media. I have really only started doing Facebook during COVID. And that's just kind of, I was lonely and I want to know what was going on with my friends. And so I am not an expert in Facebook. And here's another weird thing about me is I like calling people on the phone. I think that's normal. I think that's okay. I like meeting people for coffee. I think that's cool. I'm not comfortable with Twitter. I don't tweet, but man, I've got to pay attention. And I know that some people love it. So by golly, I've committed to become an expert on how does it work and when and how and the kind of messages that work. So each one of these, from Instagram onward, you have to be an expert in, and you now have to use these, and you have to do it this second. And if you want to communicate to anyone who's under the age of 25 and a lot of people over, you better get your TikTok game on. Okay. Okay. Just in the chat session, would you mind just telling me, just send me a little note right now. Do you know what TikTok is? Okay. Do you know, does anybody here know what TikTok is? I have 4 kids from age 15 up to 33, and all of them are doing TikTok all of the daggone time. So,
hey, Dennis,
what is that? Yeah.
I have another question. This is from Kenneth. He asked, is a church app downloadable? So can you speak a little bit about church apps?
Yes. So I feel sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but you have to get a church app, and it's got to be on your home screen. So when people pull up their home screen with all their apps on it, your church has to be right there where they can click, and they have a mini version of linking to your website, and it's highly interactive. Communication goes out and engagement comes back, and it's got to be tailored to your church, and you have to do it right now. And it's going to cost you $1,000 to $2,000. You could spend a lot more, but there are app developers that sell that product, and they will tailor make it to you. It costs about, I told you it costs $1,000 to $2,000. It takes about a month to do that. And so I'm sorry, but you have to do it. And then you've got to send it out to everybody so that people can connect and find out what's going on. So announcements, information flows out, requests go out, and then engagement. So giving people an opportunity to connect and give you feedback and enroll and enlist as well. So it has become absolutely essential right now. Now, beyond that, on the other side of the colon is an app, Tithely. It is a giving app. Churches that have the ease of giving through their digital devices, those are the ones that have done the best during the time of COVID. So you've got to have that as well. Now, everybody knows you've got to have Zoom. Google has a product for meetings that's super easy to use and requires no password. So if I was a Zoom employee, I'd worry about Google infringing on our business. Video announcements. The open rate for a video is about 5 times higher than for an email that does not have a video. Now, you may not know this, but over 90% of texts get open within 90 seconds. So if you want to get a hold of people, texting is going to be your best way. So there are some limits on the number of characters you want to put in there, but they'll watch a short video through their text as well. My favorite new social media technology service that has come out is Bombbomb. So I pay them about $50 a month so that I can click and send a tailored video to anyone. It takes virtually no time. It's just part of my email. I just click a little button. I can record a video on email and then send it out. It takes no time. And people open the videos. It's just astonishing. All right, well, let me pause. Daryl, what am I missing when we talk about social media and technology when you're planning a church capital campaign in the time of COVID?
Let me just piggyback on your last comment, Dennis, about Bombbomb. Dennis is right. That's great social media technology. Just another word about that is that when Dennis talked about clicking on a button and sending those videos, those are personalized. So it would be like, hello, John, I hope you're having a good day.
Right.
And then he says his 30-second message, hope you can come to this event. He pushes send, and then he starts the same video. Hello, Sharon. I hope you're having a great day. So these are like just boom, 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 very consecutive, personalized videos. Definitely worth the $50 a month. So, excuse me, Dennis, just a little add on there.
You're spot on, and we're going to have to spend a little bit more money, but we're going to have to. We kind of have no choice. I mean, that is the world right now. So if your church needs to do a capital campaign in the time of COVID, this is a new set of tools. Yesterday, my son had a snow day, which I've now discovered is there's no such thing as missing school on a snow day. That snow has apparently become irrelevant. You're still going to be in class. It's just going to be on Zoom. So the education world has shifted. Now we have got to shift as well. Now, let me tell you a quick story about Church of the Nativity. This is a Catholic church in a suburban area where we managed a capital campaign. And it was one of the reasons that we were so successful is because we sought to seek out innovative ways to communicate. Now, you remember the old paradigm is you would mail a newsletter, you would have an announcement at worship, and you would have the Sunday bulletin. Okay, that was kind of it. That equated to 100%. So Nativity, we sought to shift so that those three things that were 100% now became about 1/3 of the way we communicated. And so our shift has got to happen now, and we've got to be agile, and we've got to and begin experimenting with every single thing. So I apologize for being the bearer of bad news, but we've got to do it. We got to do it right now. All right, now let me shift gears because I want to talk about the details of the specific action steps in the next. We're going to be together about another 12 or 15 minutes, and I would again encourage you to ask any questions that might come to mind as we
Dennis,
go.
I don't have a question, but I do have a comment. Patricia let us know that her church uses app through LPI. They do the bulletins, website, and app, and their e-giving is through WeShare, which is also through LPI. Thank you for sharing that information, Patricia.
Right. So there are numerous giving apps. There are numerous church apps. So you have got to figure you you can Google this today. Church apps, like anything else, like you're hiring a plumber or an electrician. Please get several bids. They'll ask you lots of questions, and begin that March this second. And then it's going to take you about a year to get everybody to shift over to that. And I'm sure you're all familiar with the challenge of keeping track of everybody's phone number and email address. It's going to be that headache from here on out. But maybe the app gives us an advantage because everybody wants an app at their fingertips for virtually everything. I, kicking and screaming, I eventually got Amazon on my phone so that I could order books on my phone when the thought came to my head. So it's the future, and the future is here. So please be vigorous. If we're not good stewards of the church, it won't be here for the next generation. All right, now let's shift gears to the specific actions you can take as you consider doing a church capital campaign in the time of COVID. Now, these 7 steps are part and parcel of what a church capital campaign looks like. And we've got to do them just a little bit differently because of the pandemic and our isolation. And the 7 are: we've got to teach stewardship. We have to engage people in prayer and discernment. We have to involve them in decision-making, connect people socially, engage them as a volunteer, be deliberate about asking, and thank them. So this is the standard stock and trade of a church capital campaign. But now let's get super detailed on what that looks like. So when you're teaching stewardship, now we will give you our year-round stewardship system. If you just send me an email, you can sign up for this service where you get a monthly training video and cut and paste announcements for your bulletin, stewardship committee agendas, and guidelines for lay speakers. And so we'll train them. There's a training video, but we want you to have year-round lay speakers. In the old days, you could do it from the pulpit. Now it's got to be on video, and we mail those out. They're 3 minutes max, so they can't wax eloquently for an hour. 3 minutes, and we'll give them the 3 questions that they need to answer. The sermons on video, sermons on stewardship have got to be on video as well. So I'm working with a wonderful church, I have been for the last 3 years. We're with you for 3 years after a church capital campaign to help you with stewardship. So they've taken this time. It's in Batavia. It's a suburb of Chicago. And it's very interesting because their pastor looks like a rock star, super famous. She has denied that she is such a famous person, but I think she might really be Deborah Harry in disguise. But they've taken their this time off to renovate their video capabilities in their worship so that they can record every part, and their sermons are now on their website that are easily accessible. We've all got to do that so people can click and find it. We can send links as well. It's real important that we kind of take the Garrison Keillor approach to stewardship and have lots of stories that we tell. People are hungry for stories. We got to tell people the impact of their giving. And this, we can take a video now of when you give money to the church, here's where it goes. And we can do video clips of youth ministry, behind the scenes in worship, adult formation, our outreach and serving the community. We can communicate all of that like in a heartbeat. They don't have to read an annual report. We can do it. And teaching stewardship now is in the realm of social media and technology. On Facebook, you can have an ongoing stream of the impact of your giving. You know, fun thing to do with your kids would be in your youth ministry, ask your teens to have a TikTok video contest of who best portrays how our church makes a positive impact in the world. All right, Daryl, am I leaving anything out under teaching stewardship using technology? And so
I think you're spot on. Yeah,
okay.
That's
right.
really important.
All right. Let's shift gears then. Prayer and discernment. We all have that need to connect with God through time of prayer. So what we discovered, one of the things I learned from Daryl at his work at Our Lady of Lourdes is that, man, you can have a big impact on people, even though you're not meeting together. They're still not worshiping together. And it kind of elevates the importance of your prayer team volunteers. They can all meet by Zoom, and they've got to figure out ways they can connect one-on-one with people and have live prayer events, which are doable. You know, Zoom, you can have hundreds and hundreds. I was in one Zoom meeting with thousands of people, all connected. So we can be together while we are separate. One of the things we discovered, this underlined in bold, surveying members on prayer needs, you can do a Survey Monkey survey, and it's free and it's quick and it's easy. So we had one church, it was in New York, that did a survey. They called every member of the congregation and asked them, what might I pray for on your behalf? That's it, just one question survey. Giving went up by 16%. Isn't that remarkable? Isn't that a cool story? You can even do Bible studies by Zoom. You know, always we recommend doing a 2-week prayer guide before you do your church capital campaign. However, you know, now you can do that by video. You can have video reflections where people, normally it would be in print. You can have 14 different video presentations, one per day, that people will open and watch. So because we have a lot of time on our screens, people are more willing to watch brief videos. So you can just plan on sending them out one per day and people will read them. All right, Daryl, am I missing anything?
The prayer guide activity, whether it's printed or done by video, that can really enhance the collective effort of the prayer team. There's lots of ways to do that, but often when they're personal, a personal reflection of how God is working in your life with a connected scripture, and then maybe a question for folks to ponder and to reflect on, those are very effective. So not only does it bring a group together who's creating that resource, but it's effective in encouraging prayer and discernment among the congregants or in the parish.
Great. Thanks, Daryl. Okay, so here's another interesting thing you can do. So Zoom is kind of a blessing, and it's really easy to record on Zoom. So that's one resource. And the other resource, we've asked people in the past to just record on their phone. Just set up your phone and record your 3-minute reflection. And you can do it 10 times until you're happy, and then just email me that link, email me your video. Now we do that, and some people just are uncomfortable with that. So that's when we shift to Zoom. And this brilliant pastor I told you about in Batavia, she interviews people, and that just makes it so easy going. So you've now got two people, and they're in a conversation. Pastor is leading, the congregant is responding, and they've been prepared, but it's a very smooth process, and Zoom is very easy to record and send those out. So using technology to get the prayer needs met, it seems to be working. All right, let's shift gears to decision making. Now we know that when people own a decision, like when we do a feasibility study, people own the decision to move ahead with a capital campaign, and therefore they will implement it. If they're part of the decision making, they own it. So one of the things you told me about, Daryl, is Father Jeffrey Ott in Atlanta conducting these leadership meetings via Zoom. And then I remember you telling me about, what do they call their happy hours, which I was just so impressed by. They have happy hours on Zoom, right?
Yeah, it is a virtual happy hour. They have called it Wednesday Wind Down. In fact, they have one tonight. They have it once a month, and it's very little work and preparation for the priest, but it's highly engaging and interactive. It has some social interaction components to it, but it also has kind of a faith-building encouragement, and Father is able to be kind of in that pastoral listening role as a pastor. So really effective, easy to pull off.
Okay, that's awesome. So in the leadership gift small group meetings, has your pastor been asking people for their input on the building design? Is my memory right?
Yes, he has. And one of the keys to those sort of engagement meetings to be successful is that it needs to be a very small group. If you've got maybe 4 people, maybe 5, that's great, because we want it to be relaxed and we want it to be very engaging. So again, very little work for the pastor or the priest. We've actually done kind of the lion's share of the work organizing it, but it really does fit directly into this, involved in the decision-making process.
So in my mind, I mean, it might be a new normal where, because it's so inexpensive and so quick, to set up a lunch, for your pastor somebody's got to set it up, and then you've got to go. And, a lunch, travel there and back, and it's going to be an hour and a half. It might be a 3-hour event. On a Zoom, it can be a half an hour, or 40-minute event. And so
right. Dennis, one other comment about the success of those type of virtual meetings. It's really important to have a staff member, someone in a support role, to take some concise notes. It may be limited to just the questions and answers. Clean those up, make sure that they're accurate after the meeting, and then send them out to the attendees. And then when you have the next one, build on that list so that you're continuing to send out a bigger and broader, concise list of questions and answers. And that feeds back to people what they've said, and that really builds the decision making too. They've been heard. Here's what you said.
Awesome. All right, now let's shift gears to connecting people socially. And this is a portrayal. This is from Gallup polling they discovered in their ME25 analysis of member engagement, that each of us, every church has got about 15% of the people who are highly involved, about 50% who are kind of waiting to be invited in, and 35% are kind of marginal. So the question is, how do we move those people in the outer rings just a little bit closer? And that takes effort. The most important thing that we have discovered for running a church capital campaign in the time of COVID is listening. So if you've got a screen full of people, as you've got in the slide here on your right, it's just so important that every single person on that screen has an opportunity to be heard. So that is, we want to be deliberate, very deliberate about asking each person to talk, to be connected socially. And then the second thing is to give us input on something. So we want to present a question and then hear them out. Now, the best structure for connecting people socially is if people are with their peers, so their life circumstances have something in common. So I'm old, and a 25-year-old single person would look at me as perhaps irrelevant. But somebody who's middle-aged or 60 might look at me as a peer. And that's your ideal circumstance. The Google social meetup and Zoom, people just seem to be so comfortable now after 6 months of putting up with this. We can even do our welcoming ministry. One of the things that Zach discovered in that book, Why Catholics Don't Give, is that churches that have an assertive welcoming ministry, giving is 9% above average. So please do that. If somebody visits, connect with them via Zoom or Google Meet. It seems to work. Now, another thing, we've discovered that we can pull off a lot of social activities just right after worship. Stick around. They've been there for worship. Stick around. You could have break up into different groups and have different facilitators. They're together. It's a good time to make it happen. Now, engaging as volunteers, we have discovered through our research, actually, I put together all this research in this book, The Stewardship System. And the value proposition is how to grow generosity in your church without fundraising. So all of our statistics are in here. If you send me a note, I'll send you a copy of this book. It's got a lot of case studies in there. As a matter of fact, First Christian Church of Columbia is a great example. Daryl managed this campaign. And if you look at down this panel right here, this is just the list of volunteers. It was not a gigantic church, but boy, Daryl worked hard at asking everybody to get involved. And he presented those volunteer opportunities as episodic. So they were short term. They had a beginning and an ending. And what we have discovered, over collecting our research, is that when somebody volunteers, their giving increases to a capital campaign by a multiple of 11. So we want to have as many volunteers as possible. And we want to set it in the context of stewardship. What are you good at? Volunteer for something that you're good at. It's temporary. Of all of them, Daryl, I welcome your opinion, but of all of them, in my opinion, the ambassador team is the most important because they're the ones reaching out and connecting with people. What do you think?
Yeah. The ambassadors are usually the largest team because we want to have the ambassadors call every church or parish household. And they're not asking for money, and you'll get a large team if you make that clear. We're not soliciting money, but we're giving helpful reminders about Commitment Sunday days, making sure folks got their packet, and then most importantly, do you have any other questions that I could answer about the campaign? One other comment about First Christian Church Columbia, the visual that Dennis held up, that was their first capital campaign back in 2014. We did another subsequent capital campaign in 2018, and the volunteerism was even more robust, and they have already fulfilled and surpassed their goal. So of the funds that they had pledged over 3 years, they ended with 106% of pledge. So they went over by 6%. And I think most of that is accredited to lots of volunteers getting excited, being a successful capital campaign team, and catching the vision of the church, and then ultimately supporting it financially.
Mm-hmm. So it works. It's just a conversion experience. I love it. Okay, so we only got a couple more minutes, and then we're going to wrap up. We want the ask to be based in prayer, and we want to facilitate that. So we can have prayer events. The prayer team can create a video. It can be done beginning at worship. It's always going to be done in letter. But this Bombbomb video, I really like it because it's so personally engaging. And the asking process, we've discovered the best ask is based on a percentage basis. Would you consider giving 3% of your income, or 5%, or 1%, whatever amount is right for you? So the asking process has got to proceed in multiple streams and multiple methods for people to get it. But technology has allowed us many different venues. We figure we've got to do 12 different asks per campaign, presented very gently so that there's no way they can miss it. And still on Commitment Sunday, we usually just get half the people to bring their commitments forward. So your ask, you've got to have that pledge technologically based so that people can go to your website, click and fill out a pledge card, or do it through the app as well. We're working with a Presbyterian church in Oklahoma City who's going to do a capital campaign at some point in time in the future. And they've shifted over. So now in the last annual campaign they did, 60% of their pledges came in through electronic means, not paper. So
Dennis, a quick comment. We have learned through COVID that it's important not only to send out, commitment packet materials, brochure, pledge card in the mail, but have everything available in the packet electronically on the website in a very easy to use format. You could also put your pledge card, if you know how to set up a Google form, you can set up your pledge card electronically on your website where folks could fill it out and then send it. It populates in an Excel file if you've used Google Forms. It's a great way to have it be sent confidentially and very easily.
That's great. All right, our final topic is in thanking. And Daryl, we probably should have put that Bombbomb video under here as well. It would just be so nice.
Oh yeah.
After somebody makes, the inner circle doesn't need a lot. I mean, they don't need a gift, but the outer 85% really does need to have a thorough level of thanking. And a pastor could sit at their computer and knock out 2 personalized thanks videos per minute, 2 or 3. So if we could get an hour of a pastor's time just clicking, they're going to do more than 100 thanks videos. And if they do that, that's going to be more than 80% of the funds that your church receives in a church capital campaign in the time of COVID. So we got to thank them. A handwritten note seems to get a lot of traction even now. Gifts seem to get a lot of traction, but we've got to figure out a way to make that personal connection, and we can do it technologically.
And if you're filling out an actual thank you note, remember to write it in a blue pen. That makes so much difference. And even smudge it a little bit, we think, because that shows that a real person, not a computer-generated thank you note. So you may be laughing about that, but believe me, people know the difference.
Yeah, they really do. Okay, before we end, let me just show you this one example of a really neat thank you gift that, didn't cost hardly anything. It's a cross, and it's cut by a family in Colorado Springs, and it's inscribed, and it's just, it's beautiful. It's got a little, you can hang it on a brad, and they stamp it out of steel, and it has no economic value, but it has a tremendous symbolic value. It's the moment. And if you're interested in that, let me know. I could send you the business's name. It's just kind of neat. The guy, he's a manufacturer, but he's got a heart for the church, and the family is devoted to it. 85% of your people need a thank you gift like that. 15% don't. Here's another good example. It's a, it's a bookmark. It's stamped out of brass. They need to be thanked somehow. Doesn't have to be ornately, but the symbolism of it. So just to wrap, go ahead.
Oh, just like really quick. We worked with one church and they had a really wonderfully unique, personalized thank you note. They had an artist in the church who was a parishioner, and she did it was a Presbyterian church. She did a beautiful color sketching of their sanctuary and their chancel. And then that was printed on a thank you note with a personalized thank you note from one of the thanks team members. Nice. So you can be creative, and that's very meaningful to people to get something like that.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, so just to wrap it up, and then we're going to close. We're in a time of COVID. People are hammered, but your top donors probably have their wealth invested. Their leadership donors can carry the day. We would like everybody to be automated givers. If you're doing an annual campaign, ask people to shift to automated giving, and the same with their capital campaign pledges. So if you're planning a capital campaign, get your church app going right now. Work on collecting people's emails and phone numbers. You're going to be very busy communicating through all these streams we just talked about. So get your technology game organized just right now. You're going to have to do a feasibility study and get everybody's impact. And it takes about 6 weeks to do, but man, it's just so valuable. I see in the chat we have a question that popped up. Tell us about, are people doing feasibility studies right now? Yes, we just presented a feasibility study last night to this fantastic church in Atlanta, where I mentioned earlier, they got a gift from God, this spectacular building and 5 acres in this beautiful part of town. It's, $1 million is, you can't say it's free, but it's just such a good price. It's just mind boggling. And so we asked people, we conducted this feasibility study, and the results have just been fairly spectacular. Daryl, I would welcome, you're the expert in the number crunching, but it's just you know what, Daryl, I don't know if I've ever seen a church get as high a ratings for meeting people's spiritual needs, meeting people's social needs, and the confidence and the leadership and the vision of it.
It was very high in those categories. Also, a very high percentage of people were aware of the details surrounding the purchase of the building. Mm-hmm. One key thing that we learned in this feasibility study that we would have not understood, or we wouldn't have had a clear path to, is that there's about 20% of the givers in that church who are ready to give today. Mm-hmm. But our work in the capital campaign will be geared toward about 80% who modestly give and modestly attend. And that's what's going to be able to get them up to the dollar amount that they really need. The feasibility study was clear on that, kind of like an X-ray before surgery.
Right. That's a good. So when you do a feasibility study, you really get to understand the terrain that you're headed, and you really can develop a tailored plan that then you've got to follow. Like a surgeon, like Daryl said, the surgeon really requires an X-ray or an MRI, but just really lays out precisely what you got to do. And it's never easy. It's a challenge. You got to do the work. You got to put in the time. But like farming, you can count. You do the work, and the harvest will come. Okay. Well, on that, yes.
I'm sorry. I know we're running over, but I do have one more question. Sandra wants to know if you can speak how to keep the elderly congregation members engaged when they don't use that technology.
Gosh, that's just a great question. Well, my mother is 91. And her church is just very important to her. So the key with dealing with your elderly is make it easy. Now, my mom, every day, as part of her daily ritual, she checks her email. So that is the easiest technology for the elderly to use. So we're going to use email, and we're going to put videos in that email. So literally, it's just one click to communicate with her. And that's we want to make it super easy. She's not going to go to TikTok or Instagram or anything else, but this one thing she will do. And do you know the number one reason that she's comfortable with that is because she gets emails with pictures of her grandchildren. That's her most exciting thing. So we've got to meet them where they are, and they are still going to be generous when we're running our church capital campaign in the time of COVID, because it's a part of their life. So on that note, we've got to conclude. We've got a couple more slides that talk about some more details, but we've covered the big stuff. If you'd like a copy of the slides, just send us a note. If you'd like more information or this book, send us a note. We'll ship it out to you. Any last comments, Daryl, before we go?
No, we appreciate everyone being here today. Hope this was helpful. It's a constant opportunity for learning. So we're glad we could share with you some of the things we've learned today.
Awesome. Stephanie, any last comments from you before we close?
I would just like to let everyone know that our next webinar is 3 weeks from today instead of a month, and that is November 18th. It's a Wednesday, 11 a.m., and it's going to be that year-end ask.
Very good. Thank you, Stephanie. And usually we get 10% of all the money that's raised in a church in our year-end ask. So we've discovered a couple of things that are extremely successful. So hope to see you there. Thank you so much. Go forth. God bless, and goodbye.